I worked with a bunch of clinics, kind of like the county systems, the low-income clinics, and that's where my journey to mental health clinical work began. And so I always say I've been a therapist by default, but I love it now.
Hi, I'm Kim Tolson and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. I'm so excited because I'm here today with Maria Hernandez. She is a new digital nomad. She's just getting started on the journey. She doesn't know if she's going to be going next week or in 3 months. Talk about that. But I'm so excited to have you here because I don't really have a lot of guests usually that are just starting the journey. So this is super exciting for me to just hear about your process and how you're making your decisions and what got you here. And hopefully it'll help somebody else that's in the same place you are right now. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So give us a little background, like what started you from being just your traditional?
That's way too long. But maybe I'll fast forward a little bit. Well, actually, I always say, this is funny, I always say that I became a therapist by default. I'm a master's social worker, and I never, ever, ever, being in grad school, I never saw myself doing individual work, clinical work.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
I had no interest, absolutely no interest.
Wow.
I was like, I wanted to build a nonprofit. I was kind of like that activist type social worker, but I really enjoyed the micro. And so we had to choose micro, macro. And I chose micro because I like working with people, even though I'm a systems person. So it's interesting how that decision ended up. So I went, micro path, and I realized about 10 years post graduate school that I didn't want to stay in the same job forever. I kind of have this, I think some of your guests and you yourself have talked about this, just kind of a free-spirited person. I've always been. So that, I think, like, my journey towards being a digital nomad started when I was born. Probably started with my mom, 1941, when she was born, because she had it too. So about 10 years post grad school, I was in a great job. I was making probably close to 80,000 a year. I mean, this was almost 15 years ago. Wow. And I worked from home. It was a pretty flexible job. I was the only county employee that worked from home, but I didn't want to be there for 20 years because I felt like my soul was being sucked out of me.
Yeah, I understand.
So anyhow, fast forward, I finally said, fine, I'll get my license, but I only wanted to get my license, my clinical license, because I wanted to get the same sort of pay.
Yeah.
But I never thought I would do, clinical work. At the time, I don't know, it was maybe 2008 or so, or 2009, I ended up sort of needing to get a job that paid similar. And the only option at that time was to go into mental health, doing clinical work. I worked with a bunch of clinics, kind of like the county systems, the low-income clinics. And that's where my journey to mental health clinical work began. And so I always say I've been a therapist by default, but I love it now. I love it. But I was really burnt out for about a couple years. So I think at the end of 2017, I hung up my clinical therapist hat, and I mostly did coaching, like life coaching. I had coaching clients. Yeah, I didn't, I wasn't charging a lot because I think at that time I had like imposter syndrome too. And I really didn't build a sufficient caseload to be able to maintain my budget and my expenses. Yeah. But I really enjoyed it, actually. So I had maybe like 10 clients. And ultimately I ended up hanging up that hat too. And I kept my office, and I kept my business. I kept my intermittent part-time private practice for about 12 years. That's what I've had.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yes. And then the pandemic rolled around, and I was doing clinical supervision, and I was also doing hospital social work. And I had this, I thought, a really great job where I would work 12-hour shifts. I did two shifts, maybe 3 shifts in a week, and I was set, like all my expenses were covered. Because I think I was at the top of the pay because I've been a master's level social worker for 24 years now, I think. So it was great. And the pandemic rolled around and two things happened. My youngest son, 17 at the time, no, 16, maybe 17. We had a couple of things that happened in the past couple of years, very unexpected loss. And then the pandemic. So academically, he just tanked.
Yeah.
He went from a B, C student to D's and F's.
Wow.
And he's home alone, and because he's the last one. And so my husband, of course, didn't have the flexibility that I did. And I was, even though it was a great job, I was driving like 2 hours away, and I would stay overnight to do my 2 shifts. So at that time, the way the digital format actually was introduced to me, the supervisees I had asked me if I could continue doing supervision, but via virtual. And I remember thinking, no, I don't like that. This doesn't feel the same. I'm not going to feel the same with you guys. So, because of the pandemic, of course, we all thought it was going to be a couple months. So we said, well, let's see what happens. And then I think by April, we realized this was going to be long term. And the hospital was basically telling us we couldn't meet in person, which I'm glad. So I was kind of forced into, doing the virtual. And when I started doing the clinical supervision virtually, and at the same time, my son was just, we did all the, okay, take away privileges. Okay, well, there's something wrong. I'm going to sign you up with a counselor, therapist, so you can talk about it because you're not, talking to me about it. So I did all of that. He still kind of continued to be in that place. So I thought, well, I got to work from home. I got to help my son. And again, doing that clinical supervision virtually, just, something, a little light bulb, even though I didn't want to go back to mental health because I think I was so burnt out with it. Yeah. I thought, what the heck, I have to do what I have to do. So I jumped on the internet and I found a group practice locally in LA County. I live in California, Southern California. And, right away, they're like, yes, we can, it'll take about 6 weeks to like onboard you. Meanwhile, I kept some of my shifts at the hospital, and it was a great transition. And for me, the group practice, so I always like to tell people, if you're starting off in therapy or thinking about an online or virtual practice, and you don't know where to start, or you've never had any experience, or you don't even see yourself as a therapist, I think a group practice is a great, particularly for associates, Sure. I think even licensed people, but even for associates, because it's a win-win. I mean, try to find a good practice, but it's a win-win because as building your own private practice, which is where I am now, getting your own clients, it can take time. I mean, it can take 6 months to a year. Yeah. So I joined a group practice, and so I kept my hospital job for a little bit. And then eventually, I think by August 2020, I transitioned into full-time virtual. Wow. Yeah. And at that same time, my son was he was a junior going into his senior year. And I said, hey, with these grades, you're probably not going to go to college. Yeah, right. And he's like, yeah, well, I don't want to go to college. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And he's a competitive soccer player. Nice. And he just said, Mom, I just want to play soccer. And he said, the only reason I would go to college is if I got to play soccer. Wow. I said, fair enough. I mean, yeah, I told him, sure. I mean, that's a good plan and you could probably do it, but you got to get your grades up, right? Yeah. So working from home as a virtual therapist, just two things happened. One, I was really able to spend an amazing amount of time with my son, got to know him, got to sit in, in some of his sessions with his therapist, and to just learn so much about him, like what was going on with him, psychologically, emotionally. And it really kind of bonded us. And I also discovered this new love of mental health, but virtual. Yeah, right. Because I don't know if you feel the same way, but I can see literally up to 8, sometimes even 9 clients in one day if I have my, hour break in between. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel burnt out at all. Yeah, right. Because you don't have to do the extra, like get up, get dressed, fight traffic. For me, it's like, and maybe I wasn't able to sort of, I don't know. I didn't feel drained before, but I could only see maybe 6 or 7 in person. I don't know. Right. I mean, so there's something, maybe just not the heaviness or the energy, maybe it's a little, but I will say, and I'll say this, I say this to a lot, because I have supervisees that will contact me and they got licensed, they passed their exam, and they're like, hey, we kind of want to go into what you're doing, private practice. Can you share a little bit? So I do. And I like to tell people, especially clients that call, especially ones that want in person. There's sometimes, people need privacy. And of course, find an in-person therapist. But I like to say that one of the wonderful things that I discovered, the pandemic sort of kind of forced me into therapy again, clinical work. But I'm so glad I have like this renewed passion. And this is the thing, I feel just as connected, and I swear, if not more connected with my clients than in person.
Same way.
Right?
Absolutely.
So then all that happened and I was like, this is great. And I happened to be living in the most beautiful home. It was a rental, but at the time it was the most beautiful home I've ever lived in. It was a multi-million-dollar property.
Wow.
It was an older home with an ocean view. So I live in Santa Barbara, and I don't know if you're familiar with Santa Barbara, but there's a part of Santa Barbara that's called the American Riviera, as opposed to the French and Spanish Riviera.
Oh, nice.
So I lived not at the top, but I lived on the American Riviera. It's just the most beautiful home. So I was with my son, building that relationship, helping him, doing something that I loved, making really good money, which, the hospital was good money. This was like even better.
Nice.
And I got to work from home, and I just felt like I was on vacation every single day.
Right.
For 2 years.
Yep. I hear you.
And then, and then we made a decision, that time with my son, and kind of really looking at, I realized that I was kind of pushing the whole college thing.
Yeah.
Even though I'm absolutely not a believer that young people have to do college. It's not what it used to be.
Right.
It's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
Like for my siblings and I, most of us got a higher education. It had absolutely changed the course of our lives, but we were also first generation Mexican American. So, but the times were different too, right?
Right.
So I was definitely not going to push college on my son. And so, I, with this newfound, career that had a lot of flexibility.
Right.
One day, just the idea of like going to Spain, because he said all he wants to do is become a professional soccer player. That's all this kid wants to do.
That's amazing.
But so many kids say that, and it's been really tricky for me, knowing the statistics of the possibility, and at the same time, really, my son is naturally talented player, but he's not one of those kids that's out there practicing for 4 hours. So it's hard for me but he's so darn talented that, as compared to the boys that do practice 3 or 4 hours a day, he's right there. So, he just has a lot of talent.
Amazing.
His dad and I are both we've been soccer players our whole lives. Wow. So I think he was born with a little bit of soccer blood. So I said to him, hey, what do you think about going to Spain to train? And, I thought he was going to be like, no way, I'm not leaving home. And he's like, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we found an academy, we found a program, and off he went, and we both went.
Wow.
Yes. That was September 2021.
Okay. Wow. Was this his senior year, or?
It was his senior year, so he had to complete his senior year virtually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He left his girlfriend. Yeah, he left that's what I was saying. At the time he had his girlfriend, his friends, his soccer team, his club soccer team is very competitive. They were doing really well. Most of actually about 80 or 90% of the boys on his team, they all got college offers. Yeah. So he's playing on a really good team. And, he was just enjoying his senior year. We live in this beautiful city and beautiful home at the time. Yeah. And, I was actually surprised with his answer. And I realized that kid has a little bit of gypsy blood too. Not just his mom and not just his grandma, even though we're Mexican. So
that's great.
Yeah. So off we went, because he didn't, at the time, it was pretty expensive. And my going with him was going to cost an additional $4,000, which kind of didn't have, because we had to pay quite a bit to put the deposit down. Wow. And he said, well, Mom, and at the time there was no direct flights. Oh my gosh. Because of COVID. Right. So, no direct flights anymore. They were doing all of these. So he said, and I told him that, I said, I can pay for the unaccompanied minor. You can jump on the phone when you're at the airport, or I just stay and I save some money, but you'd have to go alone. Or if you really, really want me to, I can go with you. Wow. And he said, actually, I was surprised by this answer because it just showed me how, he's got a lot of confidence, but obviously he's still young. He's still young. And he travels with his team domestic flights, does that all the time. Not all the time, but enough. And, just internationally, I think that scared him. And he said, well, I understand if you can't go, but I would really like for you to come if you can. And I was sitting there going,
That's
oh, darn.
please come.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And,
Right.
I did have the money and I didn't. And it
Yeah,
was like, but I'm glad I went because then that's what actually really opened up the where I am now.
that's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you guys there?
So I was there for a month. His program was a 10-month program. And this is the other, we had a big wrench thrown into the whole mix. The soccer program that we chose, the academy, I don't know if this will come back to bite me, but I don't think so. It was a complete disappointment,
Man.
bordering on scam,
Oh
honestly. Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yes, we lost a lot of money, a lot of money.
Okay.
At the end, he got to train
Okay.
every day
Yeah.
and he was happy with that.
Wow.
But he got lucky because he's a talented player.
Mm.
Some of the boys, this program advertises itself as an elite training academy.
Wow.
It's not elite by any way, by any measure. And my partner, which is Eric's, my son's dad, he's the assistant coach for his elite club team, right? So, and we know soccer. My husband was a professional soccer player briefly, but he was a professional soccer player too. So, it was a complete disappointment. Eric was happy because he was in Spain and playing soccer every day. But it was for us because we invested so much money in his development. We didn't have extra $24,000 to just, oh, if I
Right.
wanted to send him to Spain on a vacation, I could have done that and it would have been cheaper, right? Or I would have been there with him. So we had this unfortunate choice of academy, and many parents, actually, in fact, right now, we are doing a collective legal demand.
Wow.
Yeah, they've got some serious issues and it preceded us. And I think it's just catching up to them.
Yeah.
I think they've just harmed enough parents that people are just ready to, yeah. So in the end, there's a blessing in disguise and all of that. So I was there for a month. I actually wanted to stay longer, but at the time I was working, it's crazy, but I was working 3 10-hour shifts.
Wow.
Yeah, but I had I had my hour break here and my hour break there.
Yeah.
My last appointment, believe it or not, was at 8 o'clock. So, but I had like an hour in the morning, like my lunch break. And then I think I had an hour from 5 to 6. So in California,
Yeah.
then I have Wednesdays off and I have Fridays and the whole weekend off. And I loved it. And
That's wonderful.
again, yeah, with the virtual therapy, seeing 9 clients, somebody always kind of reschedules or cancels. So I always
Yeah.
had about 4 or 5 people so I would schedule 30 and I'd be happy with 25. That's
Mhm.
always been my measure or my metric. So unfortunately, though, I didn't realize with the time change
Oh yeah.
that I was going to be basically working graveyard shift.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Whew.
So I've worked graveyard shift, but I was 19 and 20 when I worked the graveyard
Hard,
shift.
hard the older you get. I know. Right.
Yeah. And at 49, that wasn't working so well. So I would literally sleep, till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, but it was hard because, my body, it took me 2 weeks to just even get adjusted.
Yeah.
And then when I kind of had this schedule, I mean, I could sleep up until about 2 o'clock, but then, there were some things I had to do with my son, like getting his school, so I could have stayed longer, but I chose not to because I wanted to maintain my clients
Yeah.
because that's what allows me to travel, my
That's right.
clients.
Right.
But the sleep really, with the time difference, is 9 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember coming back and I remember thinking, I'm going to come back to, the US. Eric's going to be here. My son's going to be here for 10 months. I'm going to arrange my schedule. I'm going to finish off with my clients and try to move people around. When I do come back to Spain, I'm going to have an 8 to the latest appointment would be 4 o'clock for me because that's like 1 in the morning.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm a night owl. So it
Okay.
actually,
So that
I'm a
works.
total night owl. I'm not a morning person, even though I do start at 8, but I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
So fast forward, the program was a disappointment, all this back and forth. I ended up going back in March and we pulled my son out of this program and went to visit another program for his gap year. So
Oh, okay.
we made a decision, there are some things I would not have made the choice on if this program had actually been a good program from the beginning. But
Right.
when we realized that he was not going to he actually declined as a player, but he was enjoying his time there, right?
Yeah.
So I also knew that college was still not really an option, and he had the gap year.
Hmm.
So we were renting this beautiful house, but it was a 3 bedroom, 1,800 square foot house, which is beautiful, but we didn't really need.
Yeah. Right.
And so, yeah, we were paying my sister, everyone, I don't know in California. I've always said, living in California, if I lived anywhere else in the US, I would probably be middle class.
Hmm.
But in California, Southern California, I always feel I'm working class.
Yeah. Right.
But the quality of life for me is worth it. So I don't complain about that. I'm happy. We were paying $4,500 for this house
Yeah.
a
Wow.
month.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. So then I thought, I told my partner, I said, I love living here. It's been the best house we've ever lived in, but Eric's not coming back. He's not coming back.
Wow. Yeah.
I know him. He has said to me, I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to become a professional soccer player. And there's anything I know about my son, he's got like my tenacity, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, short of an injury or something.
Yeah.
I said, so, even if he doesn't stay in Spain with soccer, he's going to come back. He's going to go to college. I know him. He's going to want to play. And if playing in college is the only option he has, he's going to take that. So we're looking at 4 years in this big house. It's beautiful, but I would rather use the money that I put in to travel
Yes.
and be with him, right? Like,
Mhm.
be with him, support him, because that's one of the things that we've learned over the years. Not all players, but the players that do make it professionally, a lot of them have a lot of support along the way,
Yeah.
right? Parents paying for trials, paying for camps, you got to move from city to city to try out. Well, if you don't have the financial resources to do that, you're kind of,
Right. Yep.
I don't know if I can cuss here, but you're kind of asked out.
Yeah.
You're out of the game.
Yeah.
And that's not always true. I do think there's people that, but it's easier.
Yeah.
So we made a decision to give up our house, our rental, and that was one of the hardest decisions that I made. And again, if the original program had not, had been legitimate, none of this would happen. I probably wouldn't even having this conversation with you, but blessings in disguise. And we ended up, I went back in March to take Eric to visit this next program in Valencia.
Wow.
So the first program was in Malaga, which is southern Spain. So
Right.
yeah, so it's kind of like the whole Spanish Riviera, the coast was beautiful, but it's a lot like California.
Yeah.
The Spaniards, I will say the Spaniards knew which lands to colonize. They're very similar to their native land.
Yes. Right.
So when I've been traveling in Spain, last September, and then in March, April of this year, I always either feel like I'm in California or in Mexico.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, oh, I feel like I'm home.
Right.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country. And so I spent another month in Valencia. We actually traveled quite a bit. He stayed for another month. The academy that we found is amazing. I came back saying, oh my gosh, I'm just going to do whatever I can to promote these people. They're
Oh,
doing it right.
yeah.
I get the chills. I just love them. Just
Oh, that's
genuine,
yeah.
yeah, genuine,
Right.
caring. I mean, I'm all for business. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. My life, one of my big life goals is to create a very profitable and successful social enterprise. So I love money and I love doing good. I'm not ashamed in any way, shape, or form. So my goal is to build wealth and do good. So, I was just really impressed with them. And I think because we had such a extreme opposite, experience the first time. And from that visit in March and April, I decided to invest the last chunk of money that we had, which was for my son's second year, gap year, in starting a whole separate business related to soccer abroad.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we invested, and part of it came from all of it came, I don't say part of it, all of it came from wanting to prevent the same thing that happened to us
Yeah.
happen
Mhm.
to other people, because we had a rental and
Yeah.
we were making good money, and we can afford to pay $4,500 a month. but some people are paying their mortgage.
Right. Right.
And
Wow.
one of the families that's with us in this collective demand, and it's probably going to turn into a lawsuit, is that, the dad's working two jobs now
Yeah.
because he
Right.
took out a second mortgage on his house.
Wow.
And nothing, I mean, these people just make me so mad. So we're definitely going to do a lot more exposure on what they're doing, but because the attorney has recommended we sort of, not expose quite yet.
Sounds like the macro social worker in you too. You know.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of thoughts that have gone through my head in terms of what I can do, but so it's called Soccer in Spain.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I bought two. We bought my husband, he's my partner, but we were married for 24 years.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah, we've been together 30 years. So I call him my partner, but now he is actually my business partner with this other part. It's called Soccer in Spain. We bought the domains. We invested, about $10,000 so far in the domains, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people in Spain and also here about like what this can become. It's almost in some ways it's going to be a subscription, a membership,
Mhm.
but it's sort of going to be like a Yelp review for programs in Spain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because,
Amazing.
yeah, because most parents, like, I'll tell you, there's a lot of wealth because some parents will pay $50,000 for a program out there and they're, whatever, they're going to go. I don't have that kind of money.
Right. Not yet.
And not, yeah, not yet. And most people don't either.
Yeah.
So most people can't just, fly over because everybody tells you that. Oh, well, you should fly to Spain and
Mhm.
check out the program before you sign your son up.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I mean,
It's not that easy.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
but that would have required at least $4 or $5,000, right?
Right. Right.
So it started from this wanting, to help families, and we were actually thinking about doing it as a nonprofit initially,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just said no, no,
Mm.
no, no, no. This is going to be my, and I don't. I was listening a little bit to your podcast on, or maybe you just have it on it's part of your name, but you're talking about side hustles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it
Yep.
part of your website?
Yeah, I think I probably talk about it on the website because I've got 8 different income streams basically that kind of help fund my traveling and also helps give back. It helps therapists in lots of different ways. So, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've always been 20 years, the idea of passive income has always run through my head. It's always been my goal.
Yeah.
So I'm a believer. I don't necessarily think of it as a side hustle, but that's what this will be. Because it's
Yeah.
not going to be my full time, but I'm actually really excited about it because we came back, we bought the domains, I got the business license. I have an office space, and I got the office space only because, we gave up our home. We downsized to a 1-bedroom apartment. I could do therapy from there. I mean, my virtual.
Yeah.
But for me, I think I was looking at it long term. One, I need it, for my physical location.
Yeah.
I know that I could use my home address,
Right.
but I also knew that this soccer in Spain was, I mean, I know it's a long-term, project, and
It's amazing.
yeah, I decided to use the office for both. And I may rent out my office, in this next year if I don't, or sublease it if I don't come back often enough. But I'm really excited because now I get to travel as a therapist, which you can do regardless of side hustles, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You just take your practice on the road. Hmm.
Absolutely. And you schedule the time and so forth.
Yep.
But now I'm super excited because, and I know I'm thinking about joining your course, but I'm not sure if I'll do it now or the next time it comes around.
Hmm.
But the one part I didn't know, and I was
Yeah.
curious to learn from your course, but for me, it's not an issue now because we, got a business license, and I have this other side business. All
Yes.
of my expenses traveling are paid, or business expense, I'm
Business
sorry.
expenses. Right. Right.
So I'm
Absolutely.
excited about that.
That's amazing.
And because I'm curious, I don't know if you want to share a little tidbit that's or any of that, but or maybe you should just take your course. But as a traveling therapist, virtual therapist that's traveling, I'm not sure if I don't know if I would have been able to, write off some of those expenses either.
Yeah, in the course, Jenny Shopmiller, she's a CPA and a therapist. She runs a website and a Facebook group called Simple Profit, but she covers all of that very in depth in the course about, business, travel deductions. Like, it has to be, I'd have to go back and watch it again, but it basically has to be a certain percentage of time that you're in a location is devoted to business. So if you can work that out, you can deduct based on that percentage of how much time you spend in business versus leisure when you're traveling.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
yeah, she
I'm
she
gonna take your course. Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely gonna take it. I'm just either my son and team. So he came back in May. He came back in May to finish high school because
yeah,
that's the downside, I think, for me as a parent. He's not a virtual student.
yeah,
And it was
right.
really hard. So he had to come back to finish those last like science projects and English assignment, the essays. And mom helped him a lot with those. So
Yeah.
I like to say we graduated on June 30th. It's like a week ago.
Yay!
By
Congratulations.
the skin of his teeth. But he got some pretty good grades, actually a surprise.
Amazing.
Yeah, so now he's free. He has a gap year. His team is still very competitive team here at home. And they're going to Florida, Orlando on the 18th for it's called the National Tournament or League. It's a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah, so for his age group, I think their team right now is number 4 in the whole nation. I think they were
Amazing.
number 4 last year when they went to the same tournament and we lost in semifinals.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Yes, I
Wow.
know. So they're going there. I'm either flying on the 15th and just going for a week with him
Nice.
and the team, or I'm actually looking at my finances, or I'm actually flying on the 18th with them, or I'm leaving on the 15th and doing a 3-week road trip
Oh my gosh. Wow. That would be
across
really
the
cool.
country.
So driving from California down to Florida to see
Yeah,
them.
and work
Yes.
and promote my other business.
Amazing.
So
Yes.
that's where I'm at right now. It's just the finances. I have to make sure my car's in tip top shape. So I'll probably have to put in about $1,200. So, I'm very adventurous and I take the risk and, you know,
It's so
I think I'm going to do it. My whole thing is right now, this is how spoiled I am. I got to say the virtual therapy and virtual online therapy, I know it existed before the pandemic, by the way.
right. Yes.
So I admire people. I'm just like, wow, you guys figured it out way before the rest of us.
Yeah, I felt so grateful because I had been fully online for 2 years before the pandemic hit. So I felt so
Wow.
grateful to already have my ducks in a row, so to speak, with that
Yeah, you
before.
were one of the smart ones. You were ahead of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I
And
knew
Susan
that the group
Carlina,
owner.
I don't know if you know her, but thanks to her, she
Yeah,
definitely. Mhm.
I've seen her name a lot. So the pandemic, I know for a lot of people was a, stressful time.
Yeah,
For me, it's been really nothing but blessings.
yeah,
And I've had my share. Should anybody be like, okay, good for you. I've had my share of problems and issues, blindsides and curveballs and all of that. But the pandemic really, there was a lot of blessings and just, and one of the really simple ones was Facebook groups.
yes, right.
So I'm not a social media person at all,
Mhm.
probably because I was a therapist and I never posted because I just wasn't, I'm kind of a private person. But the pandemic, I really wasn't, I was at the hospital when it started. I wasn't doing therapy and I had stopped coaching like a whole year before.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I was like free to post about my life, my account was public, you know,
Yeah,
when I say post, whereas before I used to post once a year, then I was doing it, like a couple times a month.
right, right.
But I didn't really even know Facebook in 2020. I didn't know how to use it. I mean, it's just weird. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to that. And I think I finally got an Instagram account in 2020. But the one great discovery, and I know a lot of people have issues with Facebook and what they represent and what they've done.
Relationship.
I know. Well, it's sort of like what's going on in our country. And I like to remind people, I self-published my own sort of like it's a half biography and half tools and techniques,
Nice.
personal growth and development.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there I wrote, I love my husband. At the time I was still married. I said, I don't agree with all the beliefs and ideas and perspectives and behaviors of my husband.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean I stopped loving him.
Right.
And that's how I feel about my country, our
Yeah.
country.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, there are some issues, of course, I don't like and drive me crazy. And I can say I hate them, right? But I still love this country. And, so it's tough. So I know Facebook might be a little bit different, whatever. I mean, I get all the reasons why it's probably not good. And if social media, if we end up getting some regulations, federal regulations again over social media, I would probably vote for it. But one of the great discoveries for me was Facebook groups.
Yeah. Right.
And
Absolutely.
that's how, I'm on like 4 different Facebook group for therapists. One of them, I don't know if you're on it. So that's another tidbit for anybody that's starting off on this journey. I would say, you can do a very private account. I didn't, you could do an account that's not even your real name. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And you can learn from people like you, right? That are, I mean, the information that's been in there, a lot of the information that I got from there is what allowed me to. I joined a group practice because I really didn't see myself doing this past a year.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
when I realized, oh, I'm going to be doing this for a while,
Yeah.
I want
Right.
to. That's the
Right.
difference. I
Yeah.
want to be doing this for a while.
Yeah. Hmm.
I decided to leave the group and, build my own private practice up again. So a lot of the ideas that I've gotten, suggestions on how to network, which insurances, I take insurance. Actually, I probably have like one self-pay client, but that's it. So I'm all insurance. I don't have a problem with it. It's worked out really well for me. But it takes time, energy and time, which is why I always think a group practice is a good win-win, right? They do all the marketing, they send you all the clients. You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
So, and that's the only other hesitation for me. It's not so much the money, but I just finished therapy. I met treatment goals with 10 of my clients.
Yeah. Wow.
So I
Yeah.
have 10 openings right now.
Yes. Right. Right.
So if I take off next
Mhm.
week versus in 3 months,
Yeah. You're good
I,
to go.
yeah, I may or may not get the clients. A lot of times people forget that, we don't, if we don't have clients, we don't get paid, right?
That's right. Hmm.
That's the thing about being in business for yourself. There's always that. Well, but I'm pretty confident. I mean, I have calls coming in every day. So, I'm just one of those people. It's like, it'll work out. It always
Yeah.
does.
It always does. Yep.
It
Even
always.
when that was my only income generating thing, I always knew, like, even when there was a lull, I learned to sort of enjoy it a little bit because I knew it would pick back up again, you know?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. And I'm pretty excited.
I
So
love
Facebook
it.
groups, I
Good.
don't know if you're on these. The one that I just really inspired me to begin thinking absolutely about this digital nomad
Yeah.
label, which by the way, a lot of people don't even know what that is. So I've been telling friends and family, my sisters are like, what the heck is a digital nomad? I'm like, I'm just basically going to be working remote, right? And
Yeah.
traveling.
From wherever you want.
Yeah,
Exactly.
wherever I want. And now at first they were like, well, I'm the weird one in my family anyways, but the crazy one, which I love. Call
Yeah.
me crazy. I love it. It's a compliment to me. But it's so great. Like 6 months after I first introduced this idea, I have 2 sisters that are now thinking about just retiring because they're so burnt out from their jobs and
Yeah.
getting remote jobs.
Yes. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good job if you can get it. A pretty good deal.
And now with the pandemic, a lot of companies are realizing that probably more productive, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So who knows? I might have inspired more digital nomads in my family.
Love it. Yes. It's
my
exciting.
partner, my partner also wants to be a digital nomad, but he's the guy that, he's had the same job for 12
Mhm.
years. He's a videographer. He's a
Oh,
creative actually.
nice. Nice.
Yeah, he's a videographer, graphic designer is his degree, but he just loves his job.
Yeah.
And the idea of not, which I get, right? The idea of not having that stable income and not knowing what he would do when he comes back, if he comes back, that's harder for him.
Mhm.
So initially when we gave up our rental,
Yeah.
the idea of traveling in Spain and abroad to build this business, the soccer business, it was together.
Yeah. Right.
And so couple of things, mostly finances on his end. I really struggled about a month ago because I had to make a decision about waiting for him or just doing it on my own.
Right. That's a tough decision for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And, we have an interesting relationship. It's mostly good, very good. Obviously we're divorced now, but we're domestic partners, and we've never had those issues about, like, we didn't get divorced because of infidelity or fighting or anything like that. We are together probably more than anything because we live in Santa Barbara,
Mhm.
and financially, I have to have a roommate if I want to live in a home
Right.
versus an apartment.
Gotcha.
And we wanted a home for our son. He's our only biological child,
Mhm.
and he's our last one. And we adopted our three oldest.
Yeah.
We adopted our three oldest, but we only have one biological child, and our son Eric is it. And the me becoming independent from the marriage happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
So he knows that about me. He knows we agreed to stay together to help each other financially and to support our son. But we're a couple. So we're not a couple. We don't just live together. We're a couple, and it's worked out. I mean, I'm 10 times over would rather have him as a roommate than probably anybody else, because my son's still, independent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it was a really hard decision. He was a little bit upset that I said, well, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I was like, I need to talk to a therapist myself. I was really struggling with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like breaking up all over again.
Yeah.
Even though we're still together, but the early anticipatory grief.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That a lot of times we don't recognize that that's what we're going through. So we've come to a good place. He's going to join me if and when he decides.
Okay.
He wants to take the risk or take the time. So he's going to take vacation time, and he'll join me, and we'll do what we can, together. But I pretty much just said, I'm not going to wait.
Yeah.
I'm too antsy. I've always wanted to travel. When I was 17, 18, I wanted to travel the world through the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
It never happened. I think I was too afraid, or I just didn't know enough. But I've always had that, I definitely have a travel bug. My husband and my partner and I have done a lot of domestic traveling. We did a lot of traveling. I lived in an RV for 6 months with our kids. I traveled, he stayed home. So one of the Facebook groups is the one that I really just inspired me. I forgot to mention this, was Location Independent Therapists. Are you on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And the other one is Online Therapists Living the RV Life.
Yeah, I've seen that one too. Yeah.
I love those too. I just go on and get inspired, like the last year.
No. Well, I just love your story. I'd love to hear where you end up and how this all plays out for you. Super interesting. Thank you for sharing everything.
Absolutely. And thank you. I mentioned this before we came on, so I just want to mention that, I don't even know how I came across you. I know it was through a Facebook group. And I listened to your podcast, in preparation for this. I thought, okay, well, maybe see what they're talking about. But I just learned so much just from the people that you were interviewing.
Oh,
all these tidbits, you too, obviously yours too. And so I look forward to hearing all your other podcasts, because I love information and I love learning, and you've really made it. It's definitely a resource. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I'm really glad. It's just a passion project, I
yes.
love it. And I love being able to hear that it's actually having a ripple effect and helping people kind of like take the leap and live out their dreams,
Yes. Yes.
I love that.
I love it. So thank you so much. So I love to read and I love to learn. I'm actually excited about going back and listening to your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you.
Makes me so happy. Thanks so much. It is so nice to meet you.
Likewise.
And keep in touch. Let me know how it's going. I love this other business that you got going. I think that's so interesting. It's going to be such a great endeavor.
Thank you. Bye, Kim.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.